Okay, starting with rule number 1. In the beginning of the game, take out your knights and bishops and attack towards the center. Ideal opening is getting one of your pawns in one of the 4 center squares, which are these squares. You don't want to push your pawns towards the side of the board, but rather develop towards the center. Your next goal is to take out your knights and your bishops. This is what you call development. Your goal for this is so that you can castle. So you make room for your king to castle. Finish taking out your bishops and your knights, and from there you can make a plan to attack.
So this is a game from Mr. Beast, actually. Your kingside pawns are the ones that are going to be in front of your king once you castle, which in Black's case are pretty good. White pushed one here to fianchetto, which makes sense, so that you can develop your bishop. 3 is okay. I'd say 1 square at most is okay. But what a lot of new players do is they overextend their pawns like this. Normally, if you're planning to castle on that side, 2 pawns is way too dangerous, and you start creating weak squares like right here. The dark squares are weak in this game. Mr. Beast continued to push, and now he has a huge weakness where he's almost going to lose this pawn, and he can't castle kingside anymore. Don't take your queen out too early in the opening. There's no need to take out your queen. Maybe later in the middle game when you're trying to trade, but otherwise make sure you develop your other pieces first. So here's an example of what can go wrong even though Black is winning 2 pawns. They are not developing any other pieces. So if you would actually put a computer here, it would be way more than 2-pawn material advantage for White, even though physically they're down pieces. This is because they have taken out all their pieces, and it's very hard for Black to defend when you can't use any of your pieces because you haven't taken any of them out. So don't take your queen out too early. And this applies to most heavy pieces, so that would also include rooks. Rule number 5. Trade side pawns for center pawns. So the center pawns are the ones on the E and the D file on these lines of the board. So these 4 pawns are the center ones, the side pawns is anything next to it. So the pawns on the F file and the pawn on the C file here. The reason you want to trade your side pawns for the center pawns because now Black has 2 versus 1 in the center. White began by trading, and they took out their other bishop. They traded some more. They moved their knight, and now their king is starting to get attacked, and they're not going to be able to castle, and they're going to lose material. Good time to start bringing your king towards the center even a little bit is once the queens are off the board, because then you're not really worried about a checkmate. So here you can see the difference of having a more active king closer to the central squares, rather to a king that didn't move since it castled. So now Black can easily go inches way up to the white pawns and start capturing, and now Black is winning. This was only because he was closer to the pawns, because it was more central. If your center is solid, it's really easy to attack and to develop. It's also very easy to gain space. Rule number 6. Continuing the theme about pawns. So weak type of pawn structure is called doubled pawns. They're exactly what they sound like. So here I'm going to make a bad move for white h3. Now Black can trade off my knight. I have to take back with either this pawn or this pawn. Whatever I do, I have a doubled pawn here. This is mainly a weakness. Sometimes they can be strong, but for now I would follow the rule of thumb. This is because not only do they create holes, they're leaving this pawn undefended, but they're really hard to advance because you have to go one at a time and make room for your pawns. Rule number 9. Bishops are better in open positions and knights are better in closed positions, where you don't know whether you should trade your bishop for a knight. What we can do is you can look at how many pawns are on the board. So in this position we call it an open position, because white only has a few pawns. There's actually no pawns that are still center pawns. And I mean it's pretty open here, so white has the bishop pair. Their opponent only has 1 bishop. This is much stronger for white. As you can see, they're controlling this diagonal. They're eyeing the g7 square for a checkmate. The light-squared bishop is attacking here. And because of the bishops working on the longest on the board in an open position, you get easy tactics like bishop takes, attacking the king, giving a check, and opening the attack on the queen, and getting a tactic like this where you can win the queen. This is an example of a strong bishop in an open position. Okay, so here we have an example of a closed position. All the pawns are blocking each other. So this is why it's closed. There's no pawn trades. There's not really any way to open up the position. The bishop is blocked in by its own pawns. Can't come here, can't come here, can't really escape here, can't escape anywhere here. That's why they're bad in close positions, whereas the knight can easily hop over pawns. So a possible knight maneuver that I would do, just to improve my knights. I could go to D, 2 to B, 1 to a 3. It's long, but we got all the time in the world to C2 to B4 to a 6 to C5, and the final squares are dark squared, so we're not going to be able to be attacked by this bishop. So since black can't really do anything, I'm just going to go back and forth for him and play out this knight maneuver.